Hello, and welcome to After the Sermon, a Bethany podcast where we have the privilege of digging deeper into our Sunday messages. I am Tami Delau, and today I am joined with Pastor Steve Musto and Pastor David Baxley. You will be bringing us our message. Yeah. So this is the third one in our new series, Life in the Light. But before we move on, I would just like to comment on your attire.
Yeah.
So
it's not often that I kind of dress down. It is in real time. It is opening day.
Okay.
For the Cubs, and this could be the year. That's all I'm saying.
It could be the year.
Doesn't a Cubs fan say that every year as an act of
that
prayer?
Seems irrelevant to me, dude. What is important is that this
could be the year.
Springs anew.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
The hope that we have in Christ is a real hope.
Yes.
I'm not sure for you.
Yeah, I know. It's but you have to be an optimist to be a Cubs fan. Okay. Because there's always and a Bears fan. Really just Chicago sports in general. You really have to be an optimist.
There you go.
And really be okay with pain. Okay. A lot of pain.
All right. All right. Well, when you walked in today, I was like, wow, are we doing the podcast?
Yeah.
This isn't a traditional
this
Pastor
is
Steve outfit.
No, this is yes. Kathy and I will be watching the opening game together. She is a bigger Cubs fan than I am.
Okay.
Oh, wow. So, awesome.
Okay. Well, that's very fun. So we're in a new series and it's entitled Life in the Light.
Yes.
Third week. And so I'm going to read where you're going to be, which I believe is in 1 John 2, starting at verse 3.
Yeah, 3 through 11.
I'm going to read your CSB. This is how we know that we know him, if we keep his commands. The one who says, I have come to know him, and yet doesn't keep his commands is a liar, and the truth is not in him. But whoever keeps the word, truly in him, the love of God is made complete. This is how we know we are in him. The one who says he remains in him should walk just as he walked. Dear friends, I'm not writing you a new command, but an old command that you have had from the beginning. The old command is the word you have heard. Yet I am writing you a new command, which is true in him and in you, because the darkness is passing away and the true light is already shining. The one who says he is in the light but hates his brother or sister is in darkness until now. The one who loves his brother and sister remains in the light, and there is no cause for stumbling in him. But the one who hates his brother or sister is in the darkness, walks in the darkness, and does not know where he is going, because the darkness has blinded his eyes. I know you're going to kind of take it in two chunks. So as we're talking, let's go back to that first chunk. Talking about loving the Lord and what we tend to do with that. We talking about obeying, and we just want to obey without first realizing what comes first.
Yeah, that's, that's a little message that's almost hidden in here a little bit, though. You have to decipher that a little bit. If we get to this point, we've kind of, where John has kind of been, he's kind of been, almost a little ambiguous. Is light, darkness, right? Sin. Stevie did a good job last week helping break through that a little bit. What do we mean by sin? And now he's coming to this. He's getting more specific, I would say. John's taking us a little bit farther. And I think that opening statement, though, in verse 3, I think maybe one of the most significant statements that we can get in something like this. This is how you really know. Especially, I think often in our Christian faith, we just really want to grab just tell me that thing I'm supposed to know. Tell me that thing I'm supposed to do. And when you first read that verse, you feel like, oh, good. John's just going to tell me that thing I'm supposed to do. I guess I'm just supposed to obey his commands. Now, as much as that doesn't sound like an easy thing to me, like it seems like that way. But then he comes to this really weird statement and he says, but whoever keeps his word, truly in him, the love of God is made complete. And that's where we start to understand he's not trying to emphasize command. He's trying to emphasize John's second favorite theme in this book besides light, which is love.
Yeah. And so when he starts out in verse 3, he's saying, this is how we know that we know him if we keep his commands. I think there's this collective sense of, well, duh. Yeah. This is what everybody says about religion. Yeah, right?
That's right.
I mean, if you just go out on the street and ask somebody, like, how do you please God? Well, you got to keep the rules.
Yeah, right.
So, and that's the deal. And so John unpacking this and saying, actually, there's more to it than that. It's not about a list of rules. It's not a list of do's and don'ts. So this is the thing behind the thing. That's good. One of the things we learn about in the Bible is not just what to do, what not to do. It's the character and the nature of God. And at his core, God is love. So that's what we're getting from this. So John knows that.
And I love how you will go back into other books, or the other book of John that John wrote, and we look at what he had to say about love there, and actually what Jesus said about love.
Yeah, that's a great part. As I was reading through this, and Steve and I talked about this earlier this week.
Good hermeneutics, David.
Yeah. Because John is I love John chapter 13, 14, 15. Those are probably, in John, my favorite chapters, and God has really challenged me throughout the years. And I think the biggest challenge that's come to me from John chapter 14, which is I think where John is now going here, quoting Jesus, is this one verse, if you love me, you will keep my commands. Yeah. And I realized at one point in my life, I had read that verse to say, David, if you keep my commands, that will prove that you love me. And a lot of my life, I realized like I needed to, what's going on in my life? Do I really love God? Okay. I did this, Okay. I'm keep doing this. All right. What does that mean about my salvation? What does that mean about who I am? As a man of God. And I think a lot of Christians fall into that. We so desperately want to like be able to prove ourselves. We do this in so many things in our life. I got to prove myself. I got to make the team. It's like we're almost in this constant tryouts with God. Yeah. And then if I can make the team, now he knows and I can know, I guess that means I love God. And I think one thing that's jumped out to me a lot in my life is how many people who don't love God at all do a lot of really morally right things. There are a lot of, I have a friend of mine, he is, I always called him, he's the most morally ethical atheist I've ever met in my life. And honestly, with integrity, more than a lot of Christians. Yeah. Wow. He's a guy that puts people first above himself all the time to his own damage sometimes. Yeah. He is generous with his money. He will, if he sees someone needs, he just gives them money, friends. Like he seems to epitomize what you would say, that guy's a Christian, but he has rejected God. Yeah. So I know moral behavior can't be the defining thing. Yeah. So what is John coming to? Well, I read the verse wrong. Yeah. If you love me, the overflow of love is the ability to live in obedience with joy. Right. But that shift is so important for our Christian life, and I think a lot of us live on the wrong side of that equation.
So the difference is, in practical terms, the difference is this. The three of us are in relationship together, and when I see you at the office and I know that something has just happened in your life, if I say to you, like, how did that thing go? And I'm asking you this question because I know that this is important to you, that I ask the question. I'm trying to show my love to you, but I really don't care about the answer. That's not what I'm interested in. I'm interested in, I've got to keep up. We've got to stay in relationship. And I know that I have to do this thing for you. If that is what we do with God, as opposed to, there's my friend. I've been praying about this. I've been thinking about this, and are you doing okay? What's going on? Right. That's the difference. And you're right. It's subtle.
It's subtle.
And there's a little bit of a line there, but we do this with God. It's like, what do I have to do to get God to fill in the blank? Or what do I have to do to be in what rules do I have to follow to be in right relationship with God? As opposed to starting with being in right relationship with God, being in relationship with Him, and allowing our behavior and keeping His commands, allowing His commands to be the outflow of that love.
And you were hitting that last week as we wrestle with this tension. It's almost like I proved to God I love Him by obeying everything, and yet we were reminded last week, and John sets this up for us. If you think you're going to obey all, if you think you're going to obey all your commands, you're lying to yourself. Right. You're deceiving yourself. Like, if you really could accomplish that, what did Jesus need to come and do? What He did. And so even when you think about right relationship with God, the right relationship is not what I am now doing for God. The right relationship is because of the love that God has poured out on me. Right. To experience the forgiveness you talked about last week. It's like all of a sudden we experience initial forgiveness, and then we all of a sudden think, Love was just salvation. And then we tend to yes, God loved me and he saved me.
For God so loved the world.
He saved.
That's the salvation.
Yes,
verse.
he saved. And then we forget, for God so loved me, he wanted every day with me.
Yeah.
He saved me to walk with me and to I would walk with him and know him more. And I like that John uses that phrase, know. I love that phrase. And this is, though he plays with, this is how we know. We really know that we really do know him, as he's playing with that. But
he spins a lot.
Yeah.
But it's good. Okay. So if the bottom line is not the actions that we do, that those actions are a carryover, our spillover from our love for the Lord, then our affections for the Lord need to be stirred. How does one go about stirring those affections? Yeah,
I think that's the question all of us ask in our Christian life. And it's really interesting. I'll have people, we'll be talking about this in my office. And this is one of those things where I hate where we're about to go, because I know they're about to be really frustrated with my answer.
Yeah.
I'm struggling with this. This isn't going well. And I come back to you well, before we talk about all those things, how you doing, Jesus? Tell me about your time alone with God.
Yeah.
Are you crying out to him? Are you being real with him, honest with him?
Because I think sometimes people hear time alone with God, and that's another thing to do. I've read my Bible today.
Yeah. I mean, if we treat it that way, and then we talk about, okay, let's reword it. How's your date time with God? Daytime. Wow. Because when I think of a daytime, right? Or we're going out to dinner, even with another male friend, to connect, we are recognizing we need to connect. Yeah. We're not doing this out of obligation. I could call you, have a quick conversation with you. Yeah. I could send a quick text to you if it's out of obligation. When I take the time to go to a restaurant, or I sit down with you and I'm having coffee with you, whatever it is, I have already determined in my mind there's something valuable that needs to happen here that couldn't happen any other way.
Yeah.
If we don't approach our time with God that way, then that's how we stir in us affection, because that's how I stir my affection with Steve, with Amy, with anybody else in my life.
Right.
It's those sit down values. We want to skip past that.
But isn't that, obviously I have come into this position within the last 3 years. And so my life, my time that's available for my friends is very different right now. And so I do find for those relationships that I want to invest in, I have to fight for that time. I have to make that time, even when I'm tired, knowing that when I am not walking with that friend, when I don't know what's going on in their life, there's a disconnect that happens. We do that with our relationships here on earth, but we don't necessarily do that with our God. So,
here's the other piece that we have to remember is that God built us each individually. So the way I connect with God is not the same way that you connect with God. Love is different, differently defined in some ways, the expression of that love based on who God made us to be. How I relate to 2 kids, how I relate to each kid, I love equally, but differently. Because what worked for Hannah when I learned to be a father didn't work for Josh.
Yep.
And over the years, I've had to figure out, Josh, I need to deal with Josh differently. My language changes.
Yeah.
How I say things. All of that. How much I talk. All of it changes depending on which kid I'm talking to. And, God is a perfect father. He knows how he built us. And so even the way he expresses love to us and the way that we express love back to him changes accordingly.
That's good.
And I think the theme in that, though, is time.
Yeah.
It's still time. It's still that, with either of your kids, you still have to say, but I know time. I have to say, this is for them. Now, what we do is going to look different. How we talk, all the things you just described. But isn't the value of time seems to be, when I talk about people about their time with God, rarely do I hear someone say, well, I have a whole hour, but it just feels wasted. It's very, very, very rare. If that's the case, there's something deeper wrong, but that's just so rare. It's more like, well, that 10 minutes just didn't seem to do something.
Right.
Well, yeah, I suspect it wouldn't.
Yeah.
I can't even stop thinking about most of my life when I'm sitting down talking to my wife for just 10 minutes.
Yeah.
I'm distracted.
We have a misnomer that we have this statement that we say that's quality time over quantity time. And I think that's a lie. I think quantity time is quality time in most cases.
If it doesn't have a certain amount of quantity, it's not really going to be quality.
You show me how much time you spend with the Lord. And that will, you could chart out where you are with God.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's where I love how you're saying it's going to look different. And that's so important. I can describe how I do it.
Right.
And that's going to connect with me. And I think scripture prayer is a part of that, but it could, how we come to God in prayer is going to look different, but it's this interaction. I rarely try to convince people to follow this method versus block off this time.
Yeah.
If you can just start there, the ability to live in God's love grows. And I think and Steve, you mentioned this earlier to me, and I thought it was such a great statement. I think this is so complicated for us because I think a lot of us, we just don't understand love. We just, I do a lot of pre-marriage counseling. And one of the early questions I asked them is to go back to the first time they said, I love you. Okay. I said, now describe to me what you said without using the word love. And these two people are looking at each other ready to get married, right? They are sold out. This is the one. I love this person more than anybody else. Now tell me what you meant without using the word love.
Oh man, that's good. I'm stealing that one.
Yeah. and
I want to have him tell us what he meant when he said it to Amy then. Give us an example.
Oh, okay. That's an awkward setup from 20 years ago that I need now to remember. In my defense, those couples said it in the last year for the first time usually.
That is true.
But yeah, so in doing that, they now begin to define the love that they're offering the other person. They're able to start that's what I meant. Oh, that's what you meant when you first said that to me. And what's really interesting is I meant this, but now when I say it, I mean this. Yeah. And
so how often is that phrase in our humanness more about what that person gives me or what that person, you know what I mean? When I said, I love you, you make me feel special. It becomes a lot about self.
And what's really cool though, when I'm with these couples initially, I don't get a lot of that, and I want to celebrate that. And
that's awesome.
But I think it's also because we are so enthralled with this person. We are really excited for, I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to love you. I want you to feel loved by me. But that can begin to degrade.
Yeah.
That can begin to, and so love is this interesting thing that wherever it starts, if we're not investing into cultivating it, it will always degrade.
Yeah.
It can't stay. And so when we're trying to say, I don't feel like I even know what it means to love God and be loved by him. First of all, you're normal. That's okay. But the only way to do that is to go sit with God in his word in some way.
Yes.
And let him start to tell you how much he loves you.
Yeah.
And to let him start to say, and this is how I know you love me. And you guys begin to grow in a relationship rooted in love that you cannot find in any other context apart from you and God beginning there.
Okay. We are surrounded by people who have never learned how to love well. People from broken homes, people who've been through abuse, and they come into, marriage.
Yes.
Yes. They come into marriage and they're safe for the first time. They have this person that cares about them but they don't know love is immature. They don't know what to do with this thing. And that can be scary. So it is God. It is in relationship with God that he teaches us how to love. So we were sitting here, the podcast started, and my iPad popped up a little message from my wife that said, I forgot my bike rack. I got to pick my bike up today from the bike shop. I forgot my bike rack. And I just said, hey, I forgot my bike rack. I'll have to come home and get it. And she just texted, said, it's in the back seat. It's in your back seat. She just drove it over here. Oh. And kindness, she would do that for friends. I realize, anybody, but it's love. That is love. So that being able to receive that as an act of love.
Oh, that's good.
Is a huge part of learning how to love well.
That's what John means when he says, I think at least partially when he says, the love of God is made complete. He's speaking to this relationship, this back and forth of like God first. I mean, we know this, we love only because God first loved us. John says this later on in this book right here. And yet as we're in this back and forth, I experience God's love. I learn it. I then learn how to offer my love to him. In the offering my love to him, I begin to walk in obedience. And as I walk in obedience, I know him more and I'm stirred more in my love, in my love for him. Obedience does stir. In fact, I don't want anybody to hear this and think, oh, look, obedience commands don't matter anymore. They absolutely do. Because obedience actually stirs our love for God. Yeah. As I walk with God and I obey his commands, my love for him grows, because as I walk in what is in his love in obedience, I experience greater things in my relationship with him.
So can I ask a question that's going to sound really unintelligent? When you hear or read the phrase, the love of God is made complete, obviously God's love is already complete. When he is love, when we get married, we're all growing in that. So that love of God being made complete, John is talking about the love of God being made complete within us, correct?
Yes, it says in him.
Okay, all right, so that's good.
Yeah, okay. And that idea of bringing it to completion. Think about he who started a work will be faithful to complete it in you. James talks about our faith, bringing our faith to completeness. So I think primarily this is a little bit of an ancient concept that we don't have anymore. Even the way the end times is described is the fulfillment or the completeness. In fact, marriage is described this way.
Yes,
presenting your wife. Husbands will present their wives, complete in to Christ. And so this idea of like closing the circle or completing things at the end, that you have this mission to do, and you need to work on that while you're here, but that you bring it to its completion as you do that work. And that's just, it's a different way of thinking about life in the world, and we don't use it all that much.
Well, we're talking about loving God, and that affects our behaviors. But then you go down into those verses, and I see John doing his crazy thing. There, I'm not giving you a new command, but actually I'm giving you another command.
Right. Yeah.
And then he talks about loving our brothers and sisters.
Yes.
So can we go there a little bit?
Yeah, and well, that's why. When I first came to these sections, I was like, oh man, these are two different sermons. Like we could just spend so much time, and you really could. But as I was walking through this more and praying, and just is the key connection to me is this word command. In verse 3, is the first time John uses the command at this point, that phrase. And so he doesn't define it though for us. He just says, this is the command, right? Follow his commands. But then he actually defines command for us. So how is he defining it for us? He's defining the ultimate way of loving God by obeying his commands is actually how I love my brothers and sisters. Yeah. And this is the crazy part. He doesn't say love the world. No. He says brothers and sisters. And again, he's going back to John chapter 13 in this case, whereas before I think 14 and 15, now he's in 13.
If we were to weigh on a scale, are we told to love the world more or our brothers and sisters? We are told much more often to love one another. There's a lot of one another's.
Right, but that's the closest circle. You start in your circle. Okay. So who do you love
first?
Yeah, and this is part of the fundamental nature of God too. As he gives the law, in the Mosaic law, it begins with how do you treat your family members? Yeah. And it's all about honoring father and mother and the whole. So it starts with the closest relationship and it spreads. So it's
like throwing a pebble in a pond, and you've got those circles that spread out. Okay.
Which is also the command of Jesus in the Great Commission. Okay. What do? Well, you start here. Start in Jerusalem, and then expand it out to more of Judea, and then out to Samaria, which is scary. To the ends of the earth. And then to the ends of the earth. Yeah. So that's
good.
But what's really interesting that too is when we think of the sense of the ripple, if I throw the pebble in the pond and I only got one ripple, that would never happen. It's impossible to drop a pebble in the pond to get one ripple.
Right. Yeah.
If the pebble really drops, all the ripples take place. And that's kind of where John's taking us, because he's taking us to saying, and yet if you are somehow claiming that you love God, but you're not loving your brother and sister, no, you're actually in the darkness of the one who not really is loving God.
Yeah.
That don't tell me the pebble got dropped and you've accomplished the one ripple and that's enough. Or that maybe he's even almost challenging us to say, did that ripple? I mean, if you really are struggling this much to love someone, what makes you think you love me is what John, did
the pebble even hit the water?
Did the pebble even hit the water? I mean, this phrase is really the verse 11, and I'm not going to get a lot of time in the message to unpack this one, but it's really been jumping out to me more and more. So, but the one who hates his brother or sister is in darkness, walks in darkness, and doesn't know where he's going because the darkness has blinded his eyes. The intensity of this verse is like, John's like, if you can't love, if you're hating your own brother and sister, you're blind, you can't see, but you don't even know you're blind. You're walking, but you don't know where you're going. You don't know what you're doing. Like, it's this very, it's a pretty aggressive statement. Like you really have no stinking clue at all, but you think you have it all figured out.
Yeah.
And I think that's really powerful because we really like that go-to. How many people have you heard even say, I love God, but I don't really like the church?
Oh, so many people.
Right. It's become almost this popular thing that I'm allowed to say because I got hurt by the church. Right. So I can somehow diss the bride of Christ.
Right. Yeah. I like you. I don't like your wife. That's
how many
what
of us
you're saying.
How many of us are okay with that?
That's
how many of us are okay with, I mean, if someone comes to me and is like, I think you're a really great guy, but I really don't like your wife. Can I just hang out with you? I can tell you right now, my first response is, I don't know if we're really going to have a friendship at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you have a disdain for my wife, I don't know what common ground we could ever even have.
Yeah.
That's a really good
And that's what he is saying here. If you can't love my children, what ground do we have to have a relationship ourselves? These are my kids.
Yeah. Yeah. So Tami, to your point, when John does that thing, again, he's prosaic or he's poetic or whatever you want to say, how he writes, but he says, this is not a new command. So you go back to John 13.
Yep, John 13.
In John 13, Jesus says, he starts by saying, children, I'm with you a little while longer. Yeah. So John has picked up Jesus' speech patterns, which is awesome because we all do this. We hang out with each other long enough and you respect someone enough, you pick up their speech patterns. And so he's picked this up. Now he is the elder statesman. Jesus was. Yeah. John was the student. Now John is the elder statesman, and he's teaching other people. He says, Jesus said, I give you a new command. Love one another. Just as I've loved you, you're also to love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. So now John says, I'm not giving you a new command. I'm giving you an old command. And he's talking about this. He's talking about what Jesus said here. But then he does say, but it is a new command in this sense. And
it's about to get more intense.
It is. And so some of the new command is that this applies to the church. They didn't have the church. Yeah, the disciples were guys that hung out together and, love each other. And they looked around the circle and they're like, well, we've been working on loving each other for 3 years.
There's 11. I can love 11.
Yeah, that's okay. So in the sense that this is now about the whole body of Christ, that is new. But also it's getting more intense because now we're allowing into the circle people who are not as motivated about Jesus as we are, and people who have been won to Christ from all kinds of backgrounds and with all kinds of baggage and
people we don't understand.
Right.
I mean, they were traveling with them. They had some commonalities that's good.
Yeah.
And I think part of that new command
too. So John's not psycho.
John, it's really interesting. Like, I actually love all this. Like, I don't know why, which really surprises me. I tend to be more lawyer brained.
Yes, you do.
But I love John's circular stuff he does here. He keeps doing it. I don't know why. I'm really surprised. As you defined Paul and John last week, I thought to myself, I would have really liked Paul. I thought I would have liked Paul more, but I really like John.
Yeah.
But what I like about John, and this is what he does here, he adds a lot of words because he's like, I'm not giving you an out. I think that's part of what he's doing here is Jesus, like, they'll know you're Christians because you love each other. So love each other. Very direct. But what do we often do when we don't like a command? We look for the gray. So you're saying that I just need to make sure that people just know I love them, or I guess, maybe it's just Jesus meant the disciples. He just meant my 12. Yeah. Obviously I can't love a whole church of 500 or the whole world church. Yeah. And so we tend to find our ways to get away with the sin that could go against something. And I feel like John, and he does this a lot in this book, we're going to see more of this. He's like, no, let me make it very, very, very wordy for you. So there is no legal loophole for you to try to work your way out of. Yeah. So, and then he says it 5 different ways. The one who says he's in the light, but hates his brother, that's not a sister. They're in darkness even until now. The one who loves his brother and sister, they in the light. There's no cause for stumbling, but the one who hates his brother or sister is still in darkness, walks in darkness, doesn't know where they're going because of darkness of blinded eyes. Have I made it any clear? If you don't love each other, you are in darkness and you are lying and you are deceiving yourself. There's no way around it.
This is not optional.
Yes.
Jesus,
there's no way around it.
The way you read it in John 13, it's almost like, it would be really good.
It's a good idea.
It would be great if you guys could love each other. No, that's not what Jesus meant. It wasn't
that's exactly where I'm going. Yes.
Because he said, this is a command I give you.
Yeah.
But maybe by this point, they are taking it as like, well, it'd be nice if we could love each other.
Yeah.
Well, I'm thinking just in parenting, we all know that we need to tell our children, we need to repeat what we want them to do over and over again. So the fact that he starts out, my little children, and then he repeats over and over again, that's how we learn things, by the repetition.
Yeah.
So that's good.
And
good parenting move, John.
Well, and we know this too about love in general. Again, as we progress in our relationship, although there's many things that grow, sometimes we become so used to something that we've missed what it really means to love that person. Like we get in rhythms, but the rhythms become duties, and we miss love. And I think John's like, you can't become dutiful with God without love, and you can't even become we do this church thing without love.
Yeah,
it's both are darkness. Just you can't have this, and it has to be real, sincere love, which we'll talk about more in the message. So instead of trying to repeat that, but we try to make love ambiguous, but God has done a really good job in his word to not allow us to redefine that either.
Yes.
I think a mistake that we can make is it's so easy when there are those that are harder to love to rally with our friends and help us. Yep, that's a hard person to love, as opposed to when we see someone wrestling, challenging, are you loving your brother? Does that make sense at all? Like, there are some people in my life that are harder to love than others.
We validate.
Let's name them right now.
Tammy's right here.
Oh my goodness.
No, I think you're describing that we read a verse like this, and then we validate each other's struggle with it.
Right. If you can say, oh yeah, Tam, that's a tough one.
I struggle with that person too.
Yep.
And instead of saying, Tammy, by that response, it sounds like you may be blinded and walking in darkness.
Yeah.
And we say, I get it. And since I don't think I walk in darkness, you must not be walking, because I'm blinded too. So we validate each other's blindness, and we have blind leading the blind, and it comes to love. Whereas
I'm feeling a little convicted right now.
Well, that was my point. I was hoping we could accomplish this in a podcast. So,
and let's make sure.
Okay.
As we talk about love, that we realize that a big part of love is not just, you're my brother, you're my sister, so take me by the hand, and then we, hug and all is well. Sometimes love is getting in one another's face.
Yes, right.
On some things. That is love.
Yes. Yeah.
That is kindness.
Yes.
When you read the description of love in 1 Corinthians 13, patient, kind, and you go down the whole list, you go, I can still confront you in that. I can, put my arm around you in a loving way and say, hey, I think you're wrong about this. We need to talk about this and be in relationship together. And we have, as I say too often, we have lost nuance in our culture.
Yes.
The minute I say something that I don't agree with you on, or the minute I say, hey, wait a second, just pause on that for just a moment. I don't know if you meant to say that in that way, but now suddenly we have to be enemies. That's a lie. That is love.
The swords come out at that point.
Yeah. And why isn't that love anymore?
Well, verse 6 defines that.
Yeah.
Verse 6. I'm sorry. 1 Corinthians 13:6.
Oh, I just
jumped really far away. Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sitting there looking at it right in front of me. But as it's defining love, like you mentioned, the patience, the kindness, and we all can embrace those. But verse 6 is, I can find no joy in unrighteousness, but I can only rejoice in truth. And then Paul tells us in Ephesians, speak the truth in love. So he defines love must be joined with truth. Paul here in 13 is letting us know that if there's unrighteous behavior in my brothers and sisters, I can't, and I'm okay with that, and I can be satisfied in that. That's not love either.
Right.
That's good. Well, brothers, I think we need to be done. It feels like there's never enough time.
Yeah.
So, well, thank you for joining me, and thank you for joining us.
And go Cubs.
Oh, yes, that too.